Okay, can we make a start? Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming along tonight. So just a bit of housekeeping to start with. Obviously the fire exit's the door that we came in. Toilets are at the same door and to the right. Help yourself to tea and coffee and biscuits out the back there. A couple of quick thank yous. Firstly to Athletics Tasmania for supporting the event and providing the venue. Also thanks to my committee, the TRR committee in particular, Craig, Teresa and Shelley for putting this event together. So the seminar is really part of the Cadbury Marathon activity guide that TRR put together. So if you don't know anything about that, there's a couple of copies over there, or you can download it via the TRR or Cadbury website. And it's really 3 months of free activities, running and cross-training and info sessions like tonight, and just all about getting people ready for Cadbury. Anyway, I'd like to say thank you to Matt Lancaster for coming along tonight. So he's going to talk to us about injury prevention. You've got a little bio there on your seat about Matt, but obviously quite a well-known physio within the Hobart and Tasmanian running community. He's been to, I see here, the 2008 Olympic Games with the British track and field team as an official physio, and the Aussie team Olympic team in 2012-2016. So I'll let him take it over, and thank you very much.
Thank you. So show days and things, who didn't work today? Your club too. So if I can do this quickly just to get out of the way, because there are lots of places I recognise. So I'm unemployed at the moment, willfully, which is great, so I have today off as well. So I am between practices at the moment, and I'm going to put a little plug in, if that was all right. So in January, I'm going to open up a new little clinic that is going to be called Participate Tasmania, and it's going to be in South Hobart. And a little bit like TRR, the structure of that is that behind it is a not-for-profit, so Participate Tasmania is a not-for-profit organisation. So the way things will work is that hopefully over time it becomes a little bit more multidisciplinary in allied health, so there'll be some physio, but there'll have to be some psychology and some exercise physiology and nutrition. That won't all be from day one, but that'll build up, and as most clinics are, that will be, unfortunately, fee for service in the way they are. But the difference with Participate Tasmania is that instead of just going on holidays, we're going to recycle whatever sits as profit, which won't be huge, and be able to offer some low-cost, community-based allied health things as well. So it's a really exciting project for me. It's pretty nerve-wracking because I'm on extended holiday without holiday pay at the moment. But just for those of you who I do know are wondering what's going on, that's what's going on. It's actually really exciting. The other thing that I want to acknowledge to start off with is that there's a heap of experience in this room, people who run more than I do, so I do bits and pieces, but you all bring your own experiences and your own knowledge, and even just little chats beforehand, there's lots of experience through here. So I actually want to tap into that pretty quickly. The other thing that this isn't going to be is a Sunday supplement. These are the 3 stretches that mean you won't get injured, okay? Because that doesn't exist, right? It just doesn't exist. The notion, sorry, that's what you're looking for, you to go. Within sports medicine and sports science, injury prevention is the holy grail, and we're not good at it, yeah? And so we're going to talk about concepts, yeah, a little bit, and we'll end up coming with something that hopefully gives you a framework of things to think about that's pretty simple. But the notion that there is one exercise or there's one thing to do or whatever just does not exist. And anybody who wants to tell you and dumb it down, that simply is making it up. Yeah, because the stats are really clear that people who run regularly, at least 50% of them in any one year will miss time from running through some form of injury. So not only do I really admire the fact that you guys all run, and we're going to flesh that out a little bit at the moment, but there's got to be a resilience and robustness, because whatever I can share with you, or whatever you want to read from the Sunday supplements, or whoever you want to talk to, 50% of you will miss time running in each year, and nobody can really change that. Yeah, anyway, we'll try and do the best we can. So what I want to start off with, rather than drawing up 3 stretches, is grab 2s or 3s or 4s, preferably people you didn't come with. Just quickly, I want you to have a chat with somebody about why you run.
Why we run.
Reasons why you run. Yeah. Share it with somebody. Share it with somebody. Talk for a minute. I think having asked that question, I could have just left. Is anybody, we might go around the whole room, does anybody particularly want to share something with the rest of the room about why they run? You called out before.
I started running when my daughter had a big surgery 4 or 5 years ago, and she was plastered from her armpits to her ankle, and we used to drop her brothers to school and we would go for a walk along the Lindisfarne foreshore, and she would sign that she wanted to go faster. Yeah, and so we kind of got into running from that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that still drives it?
Yeah. We park run every week, and she runs a little bit, walks a little bit of it. We were told she'd never walk when she was 4, so yeah.
Pretty powerful motivation, isn't it?
Yeah. So when my legs get really tired and heavy, and I think, well, my child can walk, so why am I complaining? Yeah.
It's really, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
It's social, it's also individual
Yep.
at other times, and I was saying it's sort of like it's meditative. Is that a word? Is it?
It is, yes.
We're all nodding.
And it's good for mental health, that's for sure.
Yes. And you can eat
To get
more.
out. And you can eat more, that's right, exactly.
And I reckon there are probably some common themes around there, aren't there?
Yes.
Shy about talking about it. Okay. All right, so let's call those you factors for the minute. I want you, again, have a quick chat, and you started alluding to something because you said it's social. Have a quick chat in those same groups about those people who are part of your running community, if we want to call it that. And some of you might just run by yourself all the time, and that's fine. But for those of you, thinking about those people around you, and you're all here, so there's a group here, or whether it's a group of people you run with on a Sunday, or whether it's work people, or whether it's a mate, or whether it's family and children for amazing motivations, whatever it is. So thinking about those sort of social people. So we were just talking about you, now we're talking about those people around you who have some influence or impact on your running. Just have another quick chat with you.
Yes.
All right, do you want to come again? Okay, again, anybody happy just to share anything briefly out of that? This person, maybe?
I think for me, being from a non-runner to a runaround now, the journey of meeting people from all walks of life and totally different goals, totally different abilities, I always thought you have to be a certain stature or something in order to become part of the group. But from a very first run, people encouraging me and just welcoming me when they are so far ahead of me in ability and everything, and yet they were still concerned about where you're at in your journey. To me, that whole community thing was just so encouraging and uplifting.
You guys?
Well, I agree with Jackie, because I think that's like one of the biggest things of the running community is the support and sort of unbiased wish for each other to do well, regardless of you.
Yeah.
I think that's really unique to running.
And lots of encouragement. They could.
If you think of a football team and the full forward, if the guy on the wing can't hit him on the chest because he's a little bit slow and hopeless, the full forward will tell him to drop back to another team. But in running, it doesn't matter how quick you are, it doesn't matter how slow you are, people genuinely encourage each other and wish them well. I think that's fairly unique to this sport.
So I'm just smiling because I've seen some literal punch-ups after relays.
Maybe not entirely.
No, I take your point. Look, the reason for doing that, other than that it gets us talking a little bit, is that one of the big shifts, I guess, in the way that we think about injuries is that injury isn't just something that happens in your tissues. Yeah? And so we have this broader model now, which is referred to as the biopsychosocial model. Yeah, so we understand that there's a lot more involved in how people respond to injury and the impact that it has on them and how we need to manage it. And so it's a pretty personal mouthful of work, but the notion of you and those around you, and we can pull some of those things apart. Incredible motivations to keep going that are fantastic, could also pose risk at times if your leg's half falling off, but I've got really good motivation to go on. Which I'm sure it doesn't. In the same way, that sense of encouragement can be really supportive to get you through those periods, or it can actually be, and I certainly see this as well, potentially hazardous because people are just trying to keep up and they are flipping into a different group on a Sunday that runs significantly faster than they're used to, and all of a sudden they're putting more stress on their body, or that bloody-mindedness that I know my leg's so sore, but I'm not going to stop because I said that I'm going to do the point to pinnacle and it's written on my program that I have to do it, so today I'm going to do it, and everybody's going, I know half of you, and it is you. So those sorts of decisions, it's not just internet, you've got a wonderful group, but there's lots of advice and there's many different things, and there are people out there who are going to say, you don't want to do all that, you just need these 3 stretches. So how you sift through all that advice that comes around as well. So at the heart of, for me, you and those around you, is your ability to make just simple, smart decisions sometimes. That this is a good time to push on, or actually this is, more sore than it should be. And, I often get asked, I'm not sure about the warning signs, and the warning signs are actually usually pretty obvious. I got up in the morning and all of a sudden my Achilles tendon's really sore and stiff, and it's not normally like that. That's a warning sign. My shin is normally just a little bit sore, but actually it's hurt for the last 2 days after I've run. I've probably got a stress fracture. It's a warning sign. So, but I think we often ignore those things for all sorts of reasons. And again, there are a few little nods around. So, one of the things and it's a really different way of framing this stuff, but, the decisions that we make, are not, you don't have to have huge medical knowledge quite often to do those things. It's you and those around you as a community making smart decisions. One of the ways that I quite like thinking about some of this stuff is that, and there's no right or wrong with this, but in terms of the goals that people set each other, and speak to psychologists about this, some people have very outcome-focused goals. I want to run 3 hours 47 because I ran 3 hours 48 last year, and whatever happens, that's why I'm training. Or I'm going to run the point to pinnacle because people at work have put a team in. I don't really like running, but I'm going to run the point to pinnacle. So people have very outcome-focused goals. There's nothing wrong with that. Except if you can't meet those things, quite often people just sort of stop or make silly decisions. There are other people who have very, sounds a bit soft in some ways, but very values-focused goals, and I'm actually picking up lots of those things. And values-focused goals are, for me, this is what probably represents the TRR community as much as I know of it as well. I run because I enjoy running, because it's a fantastic group of people, and I enjoy that. I like identifying with that group of people. I like identifying myself as a runner. I feel good, I feel healthy, I have family motivations, all these sorts of things that are very values-based. And as part of that, I want to run 3:47 this year, or as part of that, I'm going to do the point pinnacle. But if it doesn't happen, it's actually not the most important thing in the world. The more important thing is all these things that I really value. And so you're probably more likely to make smart decisions around, actually, I'm going to back off, and maybe that won't happen this year, but it will next year. So I won't go too far down the line, but this notion of you and those around you is actually really important in terms of injury prevention, and it manifests in terms of the decisions that you make about what you're going to do. We'll talk now about some of the things that you might make decisions about. Alright, if I was going to do this talk 10 years ago, I would have done 3 circles and said that the 3 causes of running injuries, and lots of the papers that were written about these things would have said structural things about you that you can't do anything about. So you've got stiff feet, or you've got flat feet, or your hips don't do something, or whatever. Biomechanics, and I would have given you, not just however long you're going to stay here for, I would have given you a 4-week seminar on biomechanics because it would have been the most important thing. And we would have talked, in those days we would have said dose, now I'm going to say load, which is how much you do, how much you train. Most of the research that's happened over the last 10 years, the pendulum's really swung towards this being the most important thing. So we're going to talk a lot more about this than biomechanics.
What's biomechanics?
Biomechanics is how you move. Yep. Yeah, did your knee fall in? Do you not have enough hip movement? Did you whatever? And we've spent, and seniors, and I've done it at all sorts of levels of runners, lots of time, and lots of people spent lots of money doing screenings to tell you all the things that are wrong with you, and if you can fix these things, you won't get hurt. And all the evidence on screenings is consistent. It says the same thing, that they're not predictive of who's going to get injured. The most predictive thing of getting injured is having a past history of that same injury. That is consistently the single most. So if you've had lots of hamstring or calf injuries, you have a high risk of having a hamstring or calf injury. Yeah? If you've had stress fractures, multiple stress fractures, you have greater chances of having more stress fractures. So the most predictive thing of your next injury is your injury history. Yeah? Not necessarily biomechanics. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. So if you've had lots and lots of injuries, you'll be so we're talking about load, we relate that to injury. We then could have come up with a model a little bit that would have said something like we need to get a balance between, if I say, the demand or the load, some scales, and I'm going to say the capacity of your body or your tissues. Yep, we need to get that balance right. And it's pretty intuitive, isn't it? If you exceed the capacity of your tissues, then they're going to get hurt. Yeah? So we must not do that. Yeah? Which is sort of weird, but it's, I reckon it's a little bit more like this. And the reason that it's only sort of there, because that's a very, very mechanical way that almost describes us as machines. And again, the Sunday supplements and the newspapers are going to try and make parallels between you and a car. Put good fuel in, and it'll go really well. Give it a service every now and then, it'll go really well. Change the tyres really, really frequently. Make sure you get the newest model of Nike and Adidas that you can. And the more you change them, the better. There's one huge thing that is different to you, and it's the most brilliant, glorious thing about being a human being, that is that you're not a machine. And there is no car that gets stronger the further you drive it. Agreed? RAV4 doesn't get stronger. No car gets stronger. You get stronger the more you exercise. Yeah? You get fitter, your energy systems get better, your tissues become more robust over time. You adapt. And that's the whole thing that makes us different. So don't let people say we're like a machine, we're like a car, and come up with those analogies, because they're wrong. Yeah, because machines don't get better. Bridges need to be replaced eventually because they fatigue. And I don't really fatigue, but we've got an opportunity to get stronger if you do the right things. So we have this load, we have capacity, but we have this ability to adapt. And that's at the heart of training. So the basics of training principles are actually really similar to what you're going to try and do to decrease your risk of getting injured. We want you to adapt, not just so you run faster, but so you become more robust and more resilient. Yeah? So if you make smart decisions and think about how your body's adapting, not just how tired you are, then you're a long way down the track. So we're going to flesh that out a little bit more. All right, just for a minute, really, really quickly, I'm going to go back into complicated bias focus. I won't use bias focus actually here. So let's say running. And we're saying that, I'm going to put a big word. Transaction. Right. Can't believe I ran this game. So mechanotransduction, I'm going to put it up there for 30 seconds. What that means is, in terms of biology, that your cells have the ability to take mechanical signals, things like impact, and turn them into biological signals that mean things change in your tissues. Yeah? I'll explain that a little bit more. So if this goes really well, then that's at the heart of adaptation. So we all hear of people who get stress fractures. Not a stress fracture.
No, this is a work injury.
Um,
An ankle weakness.
So runners, and regular runners have better bone density than people who don't run. Yeah? So if you run regularly, you will all have better bone density than everybody you know who doesn't run because of impact. Yeah? And the process that happens is impact greater than your daily impact of just walking around causes things to happen in the cells, which means you produce more bone cells, all the things called osteoblasts, and your bone density becomes greater. People who run lots get stronger and have better muscles. There's an interesting little study that looks at calf strength, and these people didn't do any other exercise, they just ran, and it measured people's calf strength and compared it to the number of days a week that they ran. The more days a week, the stronger their calf got, until they ran more than 5 days a week, and then the calf strength dropped off again because they were fatiguing. So you've got to be able to recover at some part as part of adaptation as well. So if you get it right, bones get better, more density, more robust. Your muscles will become stronger, your tendons will become stiffer and more spring-like, but that takes a long, long time. There's no evidence that if you start off with healthy joints that you're doing damage to your joints by running. Just blow that one out of the water. And the world is actually shifting to suggest that even if you have got slightly dodgy joints, as long as you don't go crazy, maybe it's not a bad thing to do, yeah? But maybe you need to be a little bit sensible. So we have this notion of adaptation. And if we can do that, then we're going to reduce the risk of injury. If we get all this right. Yeah? But we know that people do get hurt. We know that they're usually not acute injuries. So sometimes, let's call that a maladaptation. Okay, and we're going to increase. Yeah, reasonably self-explanatory. And I reckon that's almost at the heart of what we're trying to do. So when you run, you're trying to get an adaptation. You want to get it in terms of your times, yeah. But in terms of injury risk, we want to get it in your tissues. We want to get your tissues getting more resilient, tougher, and stronger over time, and it does take time. So there's a balance between this, leading to that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But there's one other thing. Again, this is why we're not machines. So there are a group of things in here that I'm going to just, for the purposes now, call modifiers, because I haven't got a better word for it. Yeah, and there are some things, and these are really significant things that the research would suggest are important and related to decreasing the risk of getting injured. So we know that these things increase your risk of injury. Stress, being stressed, and coming back to a biopsychosocial model again, yeah? We know that stress releases stress-related hormones, things like cortisol, that go into our tissues, that has an effect on our tissues. Yeah, you probably make some slightly different decisions when you're stressed as well. There's a balance between, again, I'm certainly not studying a psychologist, but between stress and coping. Yeah, and stress and coping are actually two different things. So some people can function with really high levels of stress in their life with good coping strategies. Yeah? And my experience is that quite often people who run a lot, running is their coping strategy. And when they get injured and they can't run, then all of a sudden they've lost their coping strategy and they're in a little bit of trouble. So there's a relationship between stress and coping. So it's worth noting that I think in being aware of those times, if that's something that impacts on your life sometimes when you are feeling more stressed. Now, I have no doubt that running can be a complete release for those, and a lot of people run because it's their happy space, and all those things happen. But you know, if other things in your life are changing and it's getting way out of control, just be conscious that maybe that's not the day to go out and do the greatest killer session you've ever done, you know, just to get rid of all that frustration. But it might be a day to go out and just do what was already planned as a nice, easy run, or whatever it might be. There's been a big study done out of Canberra with lots of people doing all sorts of questionnaires and things all over the place and looking at lots of biomechanical stuff and lots of other things. and the most predictive thing that they came up with for injury was shifts in stress coping. It's really significant. It probably sounds a bit waffly and a bit whatever, but it's really significant. Okay? Sleep. Sleep modifies this. Sleep's really significant. Really, really significant. You release growth hormone when you're asleep. It's one of the peak periods of time during the day. Growth hormone's really important for lots of tissues in terms of the regulation and the adaptation, all those sorts of things. It's really hard to do studies on injury risk because it's really hard to control what people do. Yeah? One of the few places that you can do it is in the army. So there are quite a few studies that have got big groups of army intakes because they all get to do exactly the same training. And so they can put them into different groups and say, this group we're going to do lots of stretching, this group we're going to do lots of strengthening, this group we're going to give orthotics, this group we're going to do whatever, and then we'll get them to do the same stuff. So there are a couple of papers that have looked at that, and they were looking at stress fractures because their intake were getting lots of stress fractures because they were running and marching huge distances on the day. And having tried lots and lots of different interventions, the only two things that had an influence were actually getting them to march and run less and sleep. And those who slept, I think it was 7 hours, those who slept more than 7 hours a night had less chance of getting injured. And if you slept less than 7 hours, their injury risk of stress fractures in the shins went up.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So again, it's getting away from 3 magic stretches, to change it. So, and particularly because lots of, looking at marathon training, it's a huge time commitment. I'm super impressed. And they people fit it into their lives.
Could some of the sleep, like because of the growth hormone, etc., could that be protecting?
Yeah,
stress factors.
Possibly. Yeah, we don't fully understand that. But yes, certainly in terms of that regeneration, and growth hormone would be part of that. And there'll probably be other things there as well. But if you're, you're working your job, maybe your kids, and so you're running at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is not unusual, and you haven't been able to get to bed till 11 o'clock at night or something like that. You're a bit skinny, I reckon. So sleep's really important and definitely impacts on how this happens. The other one that I'll stick here is energy availability. So energy availability, and we, historically that's been associated with people with eating disorders. There's certainly in women, and it tends to be younger women, but exclusively younger women, a condition called the female athlete triad, where they historically would have been described as having eating disorders, they would have been anorexic, they would have been amenorrheic and not had periods, and they would have had low bone density, and their risk of stress fractures in particular was huge. That's really well described. I think we've shifted away from the sense that all these people, people that this involves have eating disorders to more the sense of energy availability. And again, there have been studies where they've looked at not just women but men and people who don't look emaciated at all. And there are ways of measuring energy availability, doing different scans and things, and certainly lots of elite athletes are referred to as energy deficit or way under. It's something that's really common in people that we see with stress fractures, and I certainly see it floating around Hobart. It's something that the sports doctors, or those people who go through the sports docs would frequently consider as well. So I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not going to give advice there, but be aware if your training volumes are going up, that your energy availability needs to go up as well. And it's a really predictive thing and a big part of the people who are going to get a whole range of injuries as well. Look, I probably put sleep, but sort of relates to these two, just fatigue generally as well. Those periods where you're feeling a little run down, but your training program says I've got to go and do 25 kilometres today, and you feel like rat shit and you're getting out of bed. Again, coming back to the you and those around you, it might be okay on those days to phone, if your long run's on a Sunday or something like that, to phone whoever set your program up and whoever you're running with that day, going, you know what, I'm going to go and do 5, but I'm just going to do it by myself, and I might take my Wednesday 12 kilometre run up to 18 or something like that just to do it. So making smart decisions, and you hear lots of really successful runners by the time they get to the end of their careers ask, what advice would you take? And it's often, I wouldn't have been so stubborn and I would have listened more, yeah? And I would have been happier to adapt what I was doing on the way through. Yeah, so training programs are great, but be prepared to be a bit flexible. Last one, illness. If you crook with a dog, don't go out and run. Yeah? Your chance of getting hurt and injured actually goes up. And even though it seems really unrelated, your immune system's run down, everything's run down. So your chance of getting injured going up. So, don't run if you really crook. Yeah? Let yourself get better. And in terms of your physiological benefit for running when you're in that state anyway, you're not going to get a whole heap out of it anyway. Actually, I can remember when I was a kid playing in footy clubs that, anytime you're sick you had to sweat it out. It doesn't work, yeah? So these things I'm going to call, I put modifiers there, but later when we put it all together, I'm just going to call them healthy habits, yeah? So those broad healthy habits. So we've got already a picture of you and those around you, the things that make you make smart decisions. And we've got these healthy habits that might influence a little bit more what's happening around how well we're adapting. All right, let's move on quickly. All right, so the biggest thing that we talk about these days, on top of all that then, is this notion of load. Yep. And who runs the Garmins? Everyone. Who follows the Garmin really slavishly? I think it's fine. I reckon for some people it's a really helpful thing occasionally to turn it off and just go and enjoy their run. So you've got lots of data coming off there. The way that load is measured really easily, the way you can think about it is that so the load is the volume of running that you're doing. That's calculated looking at minutes times the intensity. And that's something called a rate of perceived exertion. So basically you just say how hard I was running out of 10. So if you go for a 60-minute run and it's really easy and it's like 4 out of 10, then you've got 240 units of load, and you can keep working on the rest of those things. Yeah. So if you add what you've done across the course of a week together, that gives you a weekly load. If you take 4 weeks in a row, that gives you your chronic load. Okay with that? Just log down. Because there's been lots of research done on the relationship between acute and chronic load. And so this starts to become a bit abstract, but numbers have been put to stuff. So the guidance around training programs starts to look a little bit like this one, so it's broad. Takes time. We certainly know, and if anybody says, oh, you shouldn't run that much, you shouldn't run that much, you need to run enough. So it's not always the case that people get injured because they run too much. I think I see lots of people who get injured because they don't run enough. Yeah, as we said, you adapt and you get stronger. So you need to get to a point where you're running enough to become robust enough to run. So I think the incredible thing about, elite marathoners who are running 160 kilometres a week is that they don't get injured more. That's a staggering thing to do, to over 10 years be able to run 160 kilometres every week and not constantly be breaking down. You can become really robust. But you need to get to a point initially where you're running enough. And that's going to be different for different people. Yeah? So however much that is. So you need to get, so if you're running once a week, and again, I would see people who come and say, oh, I run 25 kilometres on the weekend and that's it. I don't think that's enough. Yeah? I think they need to be running more frequently during the week if you want to run 25 kilometres a week. So you running makes you robust to run. But there's a top end. Elite marathoners typically run 160 or more a week. There aren't many people, because they used to try it, there aren't many people who can run over 200 kilometres a week regularly without breaking down. It's pretty clear around the world. So we have this minimum amount of load that you need to do. The challenge is, where is that? There's a bit of trial and error getting to that, but what's really key is you probably need to take your time to get to that. There's a maximum amount of load, but the really significant stuff that all the the science on this is saying now is what we don't want to do is be doing that, because that's a surefire way to get hurt. So if we come back to this notion of chronic running load, so your average over 4 weeks, so let's say you run that over 4 weeks. So your chronic training load is whatever that is. Yeah, so that's your 4 runs a week and whatever it might be. If you suddenly increase that, 10% rule is not a thing that anybody's ever researched, that's just made up. It's based on nothing. If you suddenly increase it, you know, and 30% would be a huge increase to doing a week, but if you do that, and so you have a week up there, the evidence would suggest that you're at an increased risk of getting injured, can't tell you what, for the next 4 weeks. Yeah, that's quite a long time. 2, 3, 4. So what that means, and this has changed the way that I practice, so when people come in and say, oh, my Achilles tendons started getting really sore, I think I bought a new pair of shoes 6 months ago and I reckon they're starting to wear out a bit, do you think that's what it is? Or you go back and go, oh, what have you done over the last 4 to 6 weeks? And there may well be a spike in what we've done a long way back that has led to it. So there's a it takes time for our bodies to adapt. It takes time for our bodies to break down a little bit as well. Yeah. So the biggest thing out of load is not to spike what you're doing. The practicalities of that are also if you have time off, and that might be because of work, it might be because of holiday or whatever. All of a sudden, your chronic load's got back to here, but on a regular 4-day a week, 60 kilometre a week run, and I'm going to come straight back in here. You just spiked it. So your challenge and your goal is over time, probably that you're trying to increase what you're doing, but you're really trying to make this a pretty smooth line from week to week, and you're trying to avoid these big ups and downs. Yeah? And practically that's the most important bit of advice I reckon I can give you today. Try to avoid those sudden spikes. Yeah? If you want to do all the amazing things that you do, be consistent. Yeah? And if you have to pull back for a period of time because you've made a smart decision to do it, don't suddenly jump back into something and try and catch up. Yeah? If it's 2 weeks out from the marathon and you think you've missed a crucial long run that you were going to do, don't suddenly decide that you're going to put a second 35k run in during the week that you're not used to doing. That's the sort of stuff that will get you injured. Yeah? So be really disciplined and careful and smart that your goal, without putting numbers on all this stuff, is just to try and smooth out your loads so that you don't spike. So the final comment there, I guess, is on training programs. So I guess at there's sorts of levels looking at coaching and training programs. So my experience, and experience of others would be that there are almost 3 stages of coaching, I reckon, in the way that if you're setting your own program. So people start off being really random without any plan. They go and do a bit of that, and they go and do a bit of that, and then they go and do a bit of that, and they go and do a bit of that. And there's no structure or plan or whatever. And then parts of that are quite fun. But when you start increasing what you're doing, it becomes a bit problematic. Then people become really good, coaches become really disciplined at writing training programs. You probably copy them, but they write it, and you have to do that because that's the training program. And it has some structure, but it has no flexibility. And then those people, I think, coach really well, are happy to be adapting and modifying based on all those healthy habit things that we talked about. So somebody's starting to get a little bit sore and not recovering, so that's a bit of a warning sign. Somebody's just getting run down, that's a warning sign. Somebody's missed time for other reasons, so instead of just saying, well, that's what we said we were going to do today, it's like, okay, well, let's pull back this week and we'll build it right to that next week. So be a little bit flexible with all those things. All right, so that's training load stuff. The next most important thing that I can say to you is big letters. Okay. Get strong. Don't get flexible. Don't get bendy. Don't spend 45 minutes a night on a foam roller. Because it is the most useless, pointless
Can
thing
you say
that
that?
you do.
I just want to record you saying that.
It is the most useless, pointless thing that you want to do if you're trying to prevent getting injured. If it feels nice to you and you're one of those weird people that thinks rolling the outside of your thigh as hard as you can on a hard bit of foam is doing you good, that's fine. Do it. But don't substitute that time for not getting strong. Because every single bit of credible evidence would suggest that getting strong is a far better use of your time. You do not release fascia. The forces required to do that, those of you who read those things, are enormous. You might cause discomfort that sends a signal to your nervous system that means that muscles become inhibited for a period of time, so they sort of do a little bit of that, but it's pretty temporary. But you're not breaking up adhesions in fascia, because you can't do that. You can't do that manually. It's too much force required to do that stuff. You know, I'm a physio and I've had to, I've been a physio for 25 years, I'm not getting on. Yeah, and the things that I would have believed that I was doing with my hands 20 years ago are not possible. Yeah? A little bit like, if anybody's ever had a psoas release through the front of their tummy. So it's a technique where you push down through someone's tummy, you get to do things like that. It works magically, it's great. Lots and lots of it. You got any idea how much intestine you've got? I've pushed around in that area with Carol as well, but you can't actually identify a psoas through all of that. It's just not actually possible. There's too much, there's all this stuff in your units. So you can probably access it down there a little bit and stuff. Just want to try and get strong. And I think so. Lots of the passive things that we've done don't work in the way that we think they do. Yeah, they might make you feel good for a little while. And so I apologise for being really strong in my strength by label. Get strong. Get a strong calf muscle. When you run, whatever pace you guys are running at, you're putting about 5 times your body weight of ground reaction force every time you take a step. Yeah, so the notion that just doing that influences the robustness of your tissues seems daft. So get strong. Get a really strong calf. Yeah, get good quads, get good bone, get good core. Do all those things, but get strong. So if you want to spend time doing things, which you should, twice a week, do some strength stuff. Yeah, and whether or not you need to, and Jackie's speaking to you at some stage.
In 2 weeks' time.
2 weeks' time. Listen to Jackie, she's great. You know, so whether or not you need to go to a class because that gives you the discipline and you enjoy that, whether or not you want to go on the internet and pick 5 strength exercises for runners, that's okay. You know, squat, calf raise, keep it simple if you want. Whether you want a personal trainer, I don't care, but get strong. Yeah, because all the research that's done would suggest that getting strong is a reasonable way to start safeguarding things. So get strong. Is that all right? I've been a bit strong.
No, it's true.
Does anybody want to ask questions about that or not?
You do see a lot of runners just not do any strength training or very little, and you know, sometimes you can see their weakness in their posture and how they run, and you think that they could benefit.
It'll help your running efficiency as well. But again, there's research on this that's really, really clear that you will, even if you're an endurance-based runner, you will improve your running economy, which means how much energy it costs to run at the same speed by doing strength training. And you won't get massive, none of you are going to go and blow up and get hugely hypertrophy, but you will just feel better running as well as getting more support to your joints and more support to your tendons and all those sorts of things. So twice a week, do some strength training. You don't have to spend hours. Go and spend 30 minutes twice a week doing some strength training. When you're doing your strength training, do it with skill. Become skillful. Yeah? Become skillful in the way that you move. All that we order. Yeah, but as well as being strong, that you can control your body nicely. And that will start to translate into what's happening when you run a little bit. Become skillful in the way that you run. Again, 5 years ago I would have stood up here and talked about heel strike and forefoot strike and all those sorts of things. It's not the most important thing. Yeah? People do heel strike, people do forefoot strike. And and clearly that's within shoes that you're buying. There are big decisions to make there as well. And running magazines are full of minimalist shoes, hockers and things like that. But there's lots of stuff that doesn't fit up with the science. That's really quite weird around some of that stuff. So the bigger cushioning shoe you give somebody, the more impact they put, because they're happy to put what they put down harder as well. So they actually get more impact. So for those of you who wear hockers, and I've had lots of people who say these are fantastic. I'm not contesting that. I've had lots of people who don't like them. The science suggests that you might change the amount of work that you're having to do and how much stress you put through your tendon, but you don't decrease the amount of impact that's going through your shin and those sorts of things. The myth, again, quickly, because I'm sort of merging into shoes, that pronation is the devil and the bad thing. That doesn't stack up in the literature. Lots of people pronate and never have problems in their life. So just because somebody pronates doesn't mean that they have to have orthotics. It doesn't mean that they have to go in an ultra rigid shoe, stabilising shoe. So the whole myth between stabilising shoes and shock absorbing shoes doesn't really stack up when people start looking at injury rates and what change it makes. Personally, go for the shoe you find most comfortable. So become skillful in the way that you move. Be mobile. Be strong with what I said about stretching. I think stretching is okay. I don't think there's any point. The notion people stretching is really interesting. That people almost feel guilty if they don't stretch. I get that all the time. I haven't been stretching very much. Nothing bad happens. It's okay not to stretch a lot. So, but be mobile. You have to move. We know that there's some evidence that if your ankle's a bit stiff, maybe increases risk of injury. There's also some evidence that it makes you run faster as well. There's a trade-off there as well. So you can do a little bit of mobility stuff, but there's no point just sitting there for 20 minutes every night.
Life's too short to stretch.
However, life is not too short to get strong.
Yeah, that's right.
Get strong.
That's
That's
on
the
the
new
back.
word now.
Be mobile. Shoes. It's clearly relevant. Other than those people who are part of the barefoot running movement. I would see, and I have to accept that I have people who come in and say, I've had a sore Achilles for 6 months and I changed my shoes and it feels better. I can't predict who those people are going to be, and I'm certainly not going to deny that that's their personal experience. It's not a really relevant thing. I suspect that's a bit of trial and error, how they got to that part. I reckon I see people, this is a true story, I've had somebody who came in to see me once with neck pain. And the reason they came in was this, I've had this sore neck for 5 years, and I reckon literally I have tried 27 different pillows and it's different, still sore. So I was wondering if you had any recommendations on what pillow I should try. At which point, maybe the reason that response is, maybe it's not the pillow that's the problem.
Exactly after 25.
I have seen people who are coming with a bag with 10 different pairs of orthotics, probably at $250 a pop each time, saying which ones of these do you think are the best? And I think to a degree people are the same in shoes. So I understand that sense of I've got a pair of shoes that I like and I want to keep doing that, and there are all sorts of good reasons to do that. I think shoes are important, and I don't think shoes are near the top of the list in terms of injury prevention stuff. I have Peter ask questions about that. One more, and then we'll put it all together. Quackery. There's lots of it out there. I don't know if anybody wants to think of examples. Fundamentally, if it's not changing or influencing the capacity of your tissues to adapt and cope with the stresses and strains of running, it's hard to see what it's doing other than stuff. Taking time, taking money, costing money. I've got a real issue, with the money side of that as well. It's really easy to say, physio and the way that I practice has changed over the years, but the notion that you've got to see me 3 times a week so I can do this really special technique to you because then you won't get injured. It's just me taking in money. I reckon that happens a heap. Yeah. Remember that? 4 massages a week, otherwise your tissues are going to get tight and you're going to get injured. There's no evidence that that's the case. Doesn't mean massage is a bad thing. I'm not saying massage is a bad thing. You take all these supplements. It's not the advice of most really credible nutritionists, unless you have a really specific reason to need to. You've just got to have a good diet. Yeah, make sure you've got good energy availability. So there's lots of stuff. The internet means there's enormous amounts of stuff. It comes back to that initial thing where we were talking about those people around you as well. You know, make smart, reasonable decisions about what seems reasonable. Because there's lots of stuff that you can spend lots of money on. It's just not going to change your risk of getting injured. I'm getting grouchy as I get older. That's like the nice part of being unemployed and not working in a practice. You can say what you like. All right, I'm going to try and draw a pyramid. So we're going to go you and those around you. We're going to go healthy habits. Running load. Get strong. Be skillful. Be mobile. Choose. Quackery. Yeah, so healthy habits, remember those things we had. So we had, in no particular order, sleep, manage your stress, manage your energy availability, and illness. Something like that. So if I was to give you advice, to put it all together, you're people, you're not machines. Yeah, you run for really different reasons. You have different support networks around you, so make smart decisions. You know, you have a lot of knowledge now, a lot of experience, so use that experience. Your experience, you know, is just as valid. Yeah, so make smart, wise decisions about what you're doing. Healthy habits. It's really important. Most of you will do those things anyway. You know, goes with what you do and the fact that you're all here and you enjoy running. So, you know, look after, take care of sleep. You know, take care of food, nutrition, manage stress. Be aware of it when it's there. You know, respect illness when you have it. Don't ignore that. Training load's really, really important. Don't spike it. Yeah. Don't think just because somebody else does that particular training program, you can automatically do that program either. You know, individualise it, be happy to adapt, you know, change things as you need to, but try and keep it smooth. Really important, get strong. Can't go wrong getting strong. Yeah, do get strong. It's really simple. Twice a week, spend 30 minutes doing things to get you strong. Yeah? Be skillful, move well, run lightly, run with good guts, do all those things. Too much of that there. Be mobile. It's up here. So use a foam roller, do stretching, do those things, but it's up here. Yeah? Do it when you've taken care of all those things first. Yeah? Don't pick 3 stretches and say that's my injury prevention. Yeah? It's rubbish. Yeah? Take care of these things. Choose. It's comfortable, something reasonable. If you've got time and you've got money and you've been through all of that, that's fine. Go for quackery at that point. But stay home and do all those things. That's enough.
I just have one question.
Ask as many questions as you want.
Just in terms of the reverse of that, I did a marathon a couple of weeks ago, and everything you read, you know, you shouldn't do much training for the next couple of weeks, and over to the load and whatever, and I had trouble coming to terms with why not, you know, if you feel okay after a few days, do you really still have to stay backed off, or
Yeah, that's a good question.
Do you mean tapering?
No, I mean afterwards.
After.
Yeah. I don't think the reason I don't think it's necessarily a blanket answer is because people run marathons at different intensities as well. And so there are some people who, clearly some people who run 40 kilometres every Sunday. And if they go out and run a marathon and they run it at pretty much the same pace, it's not really any different. There are other people, I think, running a marathon is a huge thing to go and do, and that whatever your training program has been, that just that combination of the distance and the intensity that you try to run it at is more, yeah? So on that basis, we come back and we're thinking about, where that line is. So if a marathon for you is a big spike, then I reckon there's a good argument then to be dropping off and then slowly coming back up again. I think that's reasonable. But if a marathon for you is not a big spike, so you normally do something like this and that's just there, then you might go a little bit and go. Does that make sense? So I think it depends how different running that marathon is from what your chronic training load is. If the marathon is a big increase, both in terms of volume and intensity, on your normal load, on what it's been, and I understand that your program builds up to that, then you're probably okay to keep going. But if it's a big change, then I think you need to give yourself a chance to recover.
Is that sort of saying that, like, a good program does prepare you better to get through the marathon?
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, that 4-week danger zone, because you haven't spiked, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So your chronic load is relative because you have been training.
Yeah. Absolutely. So your training is, whatever sport you do, your training is preparation to do the particular event.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that you want to try and, it doesn't mean that you go out and run a marathon every week, but your training is preparation. If I've been asked to do a discussion on recovery, then I would have said the same thing about foam rollers. But I would have said your best form of recovery is having a really good training program before you do the event. Yeah. So the better matched you are in your preparation to the event that you want to go and do, then the better your recovery would be. If you only run 5 kilometres at a time and you go and run a marathon, then that's a big change. It's probably going to take you a hell of a lot longer to recover than if you've done your normal progression of 28, 32, 35 long runs, and then you're just going to extend it a little bit. Yeah, and again, it also depends, how you're viewing that. So some people who are, okay, for talk about it, she was going to come to you, unfortunately. So somebody like Bonnie, who has run a lot of marathons over the last few years, but she's actually reasonably consistent in terms of what she does around that. I think she does okay in that. If running a marathon is a first marathon, that's a big change, then that needs a bit of recovery. Yeah, and then you go again. Yeah, does that?
Yeah, well, it's just that, because you've got another event coming up, is that paid, how much do you lose if you drop off?
How long have you got between you've done a marathon now, you're doing Point to Pinnacle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you won't lose a heap of fitness during that time. No. You probably don't need to go out and start running, Kilo, maybe, and say you don't need to go out and start running a heap of hills now, because you're going to be fit and strong from running, did you do Melbourne?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a really common one, that people do Melbourne and do Point to Pinnacle. So I reckon you're fundamentally recovering during that period of time, because you're not going to lose all your fitness, because what is it, 4 weeks between them?
5 weeks. Yeah.
5 weeks between them. So I reckon you take a week or two just to settle down a little bit, and then you just build up again. So I think for me, you're probably trying to run Point to Pinnacle almost in the afterglow of running Melbourne, and you just want to top up a little bit rather than feel that you've got to start from scratch.
Where do you stand on the point of arse baths, and how often or should you do them?
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily look at ice baths as being, again, within that banner of injury prevention. But I would look at the timing of ice baths is interesting. Again, if you take this a little bit from elite world, so adaptation and muscle soreness and inflammatory response to exercise is actually probably an important part of the adaptation process. Yeah, so that you stress muscles enough to the point that they're becoming inflamed, you're getting lots of other little molecules and chemicals being released because you will always damage the muscles a little bit. That's part of that muscle then over a few days getting stronger so you can go again. You keep pushing, that's how you adapt. So there's a suggestion that ice baths shut that process down a little bit. Yeah? So if you were during the middle of your preparation period, then maybe lots of ice baths aren't a great thing to do because you might be dulling some of that inflammatory and adaptive process. Maybe that's certainly a theory that's out there. If you were coming close to an event and you wanted to do it, nobody's quite sure whether or not it changes things in your tissues or it just gives your nervous system a big bing. So I think it's an okay thing to do leading in, but I would want to have done it before as well. Some people get quite flattened by them as well, so practice it at some stage and see how it goes. So around competition can be helpful, can flatten people sometimes a little bit as well. I think we're good. It's good. But if you're trying to adapt, then maybe you're not doing it.
Can you just clarify that the beast skill 4 is technique? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of ways to it. So I think it's probably general coordination. So and then the extension of that becomes running technique. So you're standing on one leg doesn't have a lot to do with running. Yeah, so running is all about balancing. But can you coordinate nicely to do those sorts of things which require strength, but some degree of basic coordination as well. So things like becoming good at skipping, maybe has some bearing on the way that you run. Things like in terms of being able to use muscles well, do them with good form probably becomes important. However, we know that just there are studies of this that look at people who I won't start doing impersonations running, so we won't go home. So for those people who run a little bit like that, yeah. And if you ask them to do a single leg squat, they'll probably do that. And they're probably not very strong here. So if you get them to go and strengthen that, however they want to do that, and you get them to practice and become really good at that, if that's all you've done, guess how they run? It probably doesn't change. Yeah. So to change running form, you probably need to specifically change running form. I guess the point of this is, it's really, I've had lots of people over the last 10 years who have come for me to have a look at them running. That's really good. Film it. I like doing that. It's really good. You come up with all these pointers and things like that. I reckon you've got to get this stuff right before you get a big advantage out of doing that. And there are lots of people who run, there are lots of elite athletes who run with little glitches and things you look at and go, that's not right. But because we're not cars, because we adapt, their tissues have adapted and become robust enough to deal with those particular stresses and strains. So the notion of suddenly changing and saying it must run like this because it's the perfect way to run, they've actually adapted, they're fine. They've found a way that works for them.
It's amazing, the different heights and shapes of runners who run very well, and also how their feet hit the ground. It just always amazes me how you can't judge a book by its cover, and some people just don't look like they would be a great runner, but they are.
I agree.
And, they've had that
one of the simplest models for how we run explains that a little bit. Is something called the spring mass model. So effectively, the way that the biomechanics people do this, so they model so that we're a single mass, so they can put a number on it, and we're on a leg spring. And then the advanced versions of that mean that they put hinges in the leg spring, and so you can do those things. But the thing that differentiates running from walking is when you walk, you're a little bit like a pole on a pole vault. So your centre of mass, when I put my leg there, it goes up. Yeah, so I'm higher when I'm here. When you run, you compress. Yeah, so that's the notion of the spring. So you compress, and then you come back up. So every time you hit the ground when you run, you compress. Yeah, so your hip flexors, your knee flexors, your ankle flexors. We have different stiffness springs. Yeah, not everybody has the same stiffness, and the stiffness is largely determined within our tendons. Yeah, so some people have stiffer tendons than other people, and again, this notion that stiffness is bad, and I've got to stretch it. A stiffer tendon makes you far more efficient when you run. Yeah, and the way that I normally demonstrate this, and I've got to is bringing balls. Yeah, so you bring a hard ball like a golf ball, you bring a tennis ball, you bring a soft nerfy ball. Yeah, and if you put a lot of energy into a golf ball on a concrete floor, it goes bang. Yeah, if you throw a tennis ball, it doesn't go quite as high because it's gone a little bit when it hits the ground. And you can throw a Nerf ball really high into the ground, and it goes, and then it comes back up slowly and doesn't come back up as effectively or efficiently. And that's what happens when you run. So if you go at the start of a marathon field, if you go to the front end of a marathon field, they will be stiffer. So their centre of mass won't go up and down as much. Their contact on the ground will be a lot quicker, and their recycling of energy through their tendons is quicker. Yeah? So people who run and it looks effortless and really naturally, and they're just pinging off the ground, tend to be really stiff. And some people are just more inherently stiff than other people. Yeah? There's probably a genetic predisposition. Sprinters are definitely stiffer than distance runners. That's true. Men tend to be stiffer than women. We lose stiffness as we get older, so within our tendons. So that notion that, oh, I'm getting stiffer, you sort of do in your joints, but you don't in your tendons. You lose stiffness. So as you get older, you know, and you lose that ping when you run, that's because you're losing stiffness in your tendons. So people can look at completely different shapes, but they might have inherently really different stiffness properties as well, and they can derive a little bit. And then you get to the back end of the marathon field, people just spend a lot longer on the ground because they don't have that capacity to ping off the ground. Yeah. Over long periods of time, you can train stiffness with really heavyweight training or doing lots of jumping and plyometric stuff.
Training surfaces.
Yeah.
Where you run.
Yep. So there's an interaction between our stiffness and surface that we're on as well. So if you're on a really soft surface, then to run in the same way, you've got to generate more stiffness within your body to run in the same way because there's more give in the ground. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you go and run on really soft sand, it's really hard work. That's because you're doing whatever you can, particularly through your calf, that just gets really sore, to try and generate stiffness so that you can bounce off the sand, and it's really hard to do, you know, as opposed to coming out on the track, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, you feel that you can bounce off the track because there's some stiffness there as well. So I think there's reasonable argument for people doing the sort of running you're doing in actually having a little bit of variety, not too much variety in your surfaces, because it gives you a chance to adapt to slightly different surfaces. So, you know, so I don't think running on the road is inherently a bad thing to do at all. For a lot of you, you would feel more comfortable running on the road than running on soft grass, and that's largely because it's easy to ping off the road. Yeah, and you know, if that's where you normally run, I wouldn't go on super soft grass and try and do the same session, because all of a sudden your muscles, you're going to be loading tissues in a really different way, but having some subtle changes. So I think lots of the trails around Hobart are, you know, we're really lucky to have you know, pipeline and all those sorts of things. I think they're really good surfaces as well. But I definitely don't think hard surfaces are bad. I think as we get older, we need to be more careful with really soft surfaces because we're losing tendon stiffness over that period of time as well. So it might be better as we get older that we're staying on firmer surfaces. But I'd be really careful about the really soft ones. I don't know if that plays out with people's experiences at all.
I just thought running on a soft surface at times actually makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Because when I was training for my marathon, I would run at least twice a week on a beach 10K and then get straight back on the road and then finish my run.
So I think I think you do get stronger because for those reasons, your muscles have got to work harder to try and stiffen your tendons. So I think that's good. I think having that variety between two is good. Just wouldn't get to extremes.
Yeah.
I guess to one extreme. Anything else?
I do my long runs on a Sunday. I usually do between 20 and 25, and I do a couple of shorter runs during the week plus park run.
Yep.
Should I every few weeks drop back into a shorter long run?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's the notion of that sort of 4-week periodisation and things like that. I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer because I don't know. And you're getting into coaching world there where it becomes coaching philosophy a little bit, but I'm going to do that. I guess what what the load model and what the information is telling us now is that drop back a little bit, and that's a good thing, but don't drop off completely. So don't have 3 weeks and then take a whole week off and then come back at the same level. So we think that sense of periodisation is too dramatic, but the notion that maybe you've even increased sort of, so maybe you've gone 20, 22, 25, and you might drop down to 18 to 20 and then go 22, 25. I reckon that's pretty good. I think that really gives you a nice chance to freshen up a little bit during that week. But I wouldn't go 20, 22, 25, 3, 20, 22, 3. Okay?
But that's what we all do, though. We all do that.
You all do that? I wouldn't drop off that dramatically. I think it's really interesting, the notion of, in other sports as well, of the off-season. So we started, there's lots of research that looks at the amount of training that, pro sports that people do in the off-season, and those that actually do more specific training during the off-season are less likely to be injured during the season as well. And so the notion of those big periods of, no, that's not what you're asking, those big periods of rest, we're sort of not looking at that as being best practice anymore in terms of periodisation, that we want to keep
Constant.
we want to keep your body's pretty decent as long as you stay within those parameters.
I'm probably not fine.
General.
I'm not like sore for the whole week. So.
Yeah, so I think to back off, my view would be to back off a little bit. It makes good sense, but I wouldn't shut down completely.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.